Start recording. Hello and good afternoon from cloudy, overcast Indianapolis. Welcome to the webinar, Student Loan Debt for Librarians and Library Staff. My name is Courtney Brown and I'm the Southeast Regional Coordinator from the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I'll be your host and question moderator today. Our presenter this afternoon is Ruth Frasur. Ruth Frasur is the Evergreen Coordinator at the Indiana State Library and a very passionate fan of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program.
That is true.
Just a couple of announcements. To register for other webinars or other trainings available from the Professional Development Office, please see the Indiana State Library's events calendar, which can be found on our website at www.in.gov/library. For a full list of our current in-person training menu, please see the Continuing Education website. The session is about an hour, so you'll receive one LEU for this presentation. If you're watching an archived recording of this webinar, instructions on how to obtain your LEU are in the video's description on YouTube, or you can also find those instructions on the ISL's Continuing Education site under LEU policies. So without further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Ruth.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and also Lisa for running this. I'm going to one more time put into chat just this link for the slides if you want to follow along from there. There was a question earlier about a printable version, and we will make that available to you as part of the follow-up email if you'd like. Well, it will be included. And then, of course, there will be the recording. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I wanted to, before I even got into this, to say just a brief thing about, of course, the title of this is Student Loan Debt for Librarians and Library Staff. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, as well as the limited PSLF waiver and some other things. But what I also want to say to you is this is not just for librarians and library staff. The reason that I titled it in that way is kind of an issue that's close to my heart. If you are a librarian or you work in a library, you know this. Our profession requires education, a higher level of education than maybe some other jobs that you could get. But it also pays, at least in Indiana, pretty low. And so to get the education that you need to have this kind of job, you almost inevitably are going to go into some type of debt. And my colleagues that I know personally and as acquaintances, nearly all of them have expressed this as being part of their life. But the information that I'm going to give to you is also translatable into really anybody that works in public service. So don't feel like this is like something super special for librarians and library staff. Librarians and library staff are super special to me. So that's kind of the differentiation in there. That's why it's titled this way. I am, as Courtney said, Ruth Frasur. I work at the Indiana State Library, and I am the coordinator for Evergreen, Indiana. I'm very used to talking about Evergreen, Indiana, and I am not used to talking about what I'm talking about today. But also, as Courtney said, I'm very passionate about this, and I had not, at the time when we were talking about this, seen anybody else that was being very I'm going to use the word bold, although I would not characterize myself as bold in this either. Being bold, going out on a limb and saying, hey, let's talk about this right now because time is running out. And it occurred to me if I thought that that needed to exist, that I needed to do it. And so that's why I'm doing it. It is not because I'm an expert. And you will find as we go through that, oftentimes I'm going to point you to websites, or I'm going to say as an answer to your question, you need to call and ask somebody about that. So be prepared. There are some things that I know, but there are way more things that I don't know. Here's my contact information. You're welcome to contact me with questions that you have really about anything. I yeah, I have always kind of believed in an open door policy, even if it didn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But I do, and so feel free to contact me with whatever you would like. I'm going to start this part off by giving you too much information about myself. And the first part is going to be kind of about my educational history, not because I think it's super great or because I think it's the way you should do something. I don't have any of those ideas at all. It is mostly to point out that it's kind of messy, and it took a long time for me to get my education, and it is highly individualized to my life. And I have to imagine from the right now 161 attendees in here that each of your stories that go along with this topic look completely different from what mine do, right? Because you have had your own life experiences, you've slotted your education into all the other categories in your life. So this process that we're going to be talking about, while it seems to have all these straightforward steps, is going to look a little different for all of you. That can be a really lonely thing, but can also be a really unifying thing and a way to get support. Say, hey, all of our stories are kind of messy, so how can we support one another? So I started in college right after I graduated from high school. You can figure out my age if you want to from this. In 1992, I was at University of Indianapolis. I got a scholarship to come down here from Michigan. And how was the best way to say this? I was not prepared to be living on my own in a residential college environment. And so I lasted 2 years, and my grades dropped because I wasn't always attending class, and I got a boyfriend and etc. And I dropped out. And my full tuition scholarship came to an end. So it seemed like I was doing all of the right things, but I was not mature enough to actually follow through on that. And then you see a pretty large gap there between 1994 and 2003, when I went back to school as an adult student. That gap includes where I had 3 children and was staying home raising them and going through all of the kind of young parent things that young parents go through. And I had been working at an elementary school, and I was passionate about that. I'm a pretty passionate person, you'll kind of get that, and decided, hey, education is my jam. I mean, I even to this day think that education as a concept is amazing, but education as an institution could be amazing. And I wanted to be part of that. And so I went to school for it and found that it didn't actually work real well with my personality. And so then I went to fine art. I mean, that's a very logical leap there. And then at one point, I just wanted to graduate. And I was then working in libraries. And so ended up getting my Bachelor of General Studies after the intrepid guidance counselor said, hey, you need 3 more classes to graduate. And so I took geography, the biology of addictions, and a statistics class for the last 3 courses. All 3 of those classes have actually left me in pretty good stead. I should have probably done that kind of thing earlier. And then I went immediately into graduate school from there, and graduated from SLIS Indy in 2011 with my Master of Library Science. Now, to kind of go along with that educational component, you can kind of see my professional trajectory in there as well. So while I was young parenting, I was also providing in-home childcare because it was convenient for my life. And it was also, in some respects, my nieces, who I loved dearly and got to spend time with. And then I went into the public education sector, and then into public libraries in 2007, and now I am here. all of those things, all of those steps did require an advancement in my academic standing as well. So that spot where I went from Union County Public Library to Hagerstown Public Library, the reason that I left Union County is actually because, first of all, I needed a job that paid more. And I had then graduated with my MLS. So I had the educational component to go to into a role that required that and have continued for that. All of this kind of to say that it was a pretty messy road and it was very organic. And a lot of times I made steps in both my profession and my education because I had to move forward, or I would not have progressed at all in any way, despite the fact that my children are still growing, life is going on around me. And so to keep pace with that, that's how life went for me. Along with that, I did have the knowledge, and I will say too, I did make a note in here in the education, pop back in here, of how I paid for those things. So for the University of Indianapolis, I did have that full tuition scholarship. It paid for tuition. What it did not pay for was room and board. And so I did not put in here that I did have some small loans at that time. It was long enough ago that room and board did not cost the same as tuition. So, and then I had a mixture of grants and loans. So now we're going to actually go into what the public service loan forgiveness is, because I did know as I was finishing both my undergraduate and then going into my master's degree that this program existed. It started in 2007, or was related to loans about that. And what the snapshot of it is that if you are employed by a federal, state, local, or tribal government or not-for-profit organization, you work full-time for an agency within that criteria. You have direct student loans, which is a type of federal loan. You have chosen to repay those loans under an income-driven repayment plan. There's a reason why that is. Essentially, it's because if you didn't go into an income-driven repayment plan, you would be paying your loans off in 10 years anyway, so there would be no reason for forgiveness. But these are, of course, tied to how much money you make, so that many people go into those anyway. And then to make 120 qualifying payments. Those have been the requirements for that program since it started. One of the issues with it, however, has been that it has been kind of obscured in how to apply for the forgiveness. It's taken a long time to have those 120 qualifying payments tracked and applied to your account. And so it's really has caused a lot of people to avoid dealing with it. One of the cool things, I think it's cool, not everybody does. One of the things that has happened in the past year and a half is that as part of, and I don't want to get too political about this, but this is the way that it is framed on several websites as part of the Biden-Harris promise to alleviate student debt to some degree. There has been this program, it's called the Limited Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver. It was initiated, I believe, in October of last year. And it changes the criteria a little bit for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program in that it makes more payments qualify. It makes creates a mechanism for more loans to qualify. So just a few things, and there are more, and I have a link in here to respond to one of these things, but then I have the links to this actual page where this comes from as well. That you may receive credit for past periods of repayment on loans that wouldn't otherwise qualify for PSLF. Things like the FFEL loans, Perkins loans, and there's some other more niche federal student loans can be consolidated into a direct consolidation loan and thereby become eligible for forgiveness. And then some other periods of repayment that didn't count before now do. And I did want to put some clarification in here because I found this a little bit confusing on the website where it says that forbearance periods, if you think about the loan payment pause that we are in the midst of right now, it's considered a forbearance, but forbearance periods that were provided by COVID-19 emergency relief flexibilities are not included in these months. So it makes it sound like they are not counted. That is not true. It is a technical speak in here, because then if you check out the website that is linked here, anything that would have been considered a payment, of course, you're probably not paying for them right now, still counts towards your PSLF counts. And let me take a look here. Will people working part-time at a library ever be considered for loan forgiveness? Unfortunately, no, is my short answer, but I would encourage you to call a servicer, which we'll talk about, and just to double check on that. But it generally is considered only for full-time, and full-time full-time is at the federal level consideration though as well. So it may not be like your library may consider 40 hours full-time or 37.5 in the case of the state library, but the federal full-time is a little bit different. And so I don't have that number. I'm thinking that it's actually 30 hours offhand, but you'd have to check on the IRS website for that. And then there are some other deferment periods that it goes into detail on the website that are also payment counts in there also count toward the waiver. One thing that I will say here, that I added in here because it's pretty new and I want as many of you to save as much money as possible, is the one-time student loan forgiveness. This does not have all of the same criteria as the public service loan forgiveness, and it is not exclusive to people in public service. It is a one-time student loan forgiveness. There's going to be a form that's available at the beginning of October. Anyone who has student loans, and they may be federal loans only, but I would definitely double check that this is, again, there's information at studentaid.gov. If you have received a Pell Grant, you can have up to $20,000 forgiven. And if you did not receive a Pell Grant, you'd have up to $10,000 forgiven.
Hey,
I
Ruth,
did
I'm
also,
just gonna, oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I'm gonna hop right on in here. Someone asked if we make partial payments between now and the end of student loan pause, the student loan pause, do those payments count towards the PSLF waiver?
Yes. That's actually one of the things that has changed during this waiver, is that partial payments do count, whereas for the traditional public service loan forgiveness, they would not have counted. And for the temporary waiver, there are some of my employers who said that they don't qualify under public services, even though I was serving. So this is one of those things where I am going to say, I'm going to pop down here. that you are going to need to actually talk to a servicer about those employers. So there is in the form, there's a thing that you can check that says that employer was unwilling to verify or whatever. And so that they can actually, the servicer can actually determine if they qualify or not, because there actually are some employers who don't believe that they qualify. And there was a comment was made, and I just read it today, about a police department. A man worked at a police department, which you automatically think is going to be a qualifying employer. But that police department had registered as an LLC to do their HR. And because of the way that they had registered, it came back that they were not a qualifying employer, but they are a qualifying employer. So there may have to be this type of back and forth, and that's going to actually come. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Do we know if one has to have been awarded the federal Pell Grant for the degree in which the loan was? No, that is not, no. Just if you have had that, right. And they do not have to be consecutive payments. That is correct. The PSLF servicer is Mohila, which we will get to its servicers in just a second. Why is the forgiven amount going to be taxed? Well, that's a great question. That is something that I would encourage you, if you have access to legislators, that you ask them. It is in Indiana code that debt forgiveness is counted as income right now. There are some different individuals in the legislature right now that are working to address whether or not this will be something that counts for that law, if there's going to be some type of amendment or some type of whatever action. That's why I put that it may be taxed as income in Indiana. As it is right now, it will be. And that generally amounts to about $350 for those of you who would be getting $10,000 forgiven, and about $600 and, well, about $700 for those getting $20,000. Off the Pell Grant, you don't pay off a Pell Grant. Pell Grant is just money that's been given to you. Okay, I'm gonna keep on going through that. So the last comment here is, and I won't read it aloud, but at the same time, I get that. I mean, I definitely get that feeling, and I'm kind of feeling it myself. On the other hand, it's me weighing between the $700 that I would owe on my taxes, and I may have deductions and things like that, or the $20,000 that I have to pay back in student loan, depending. So yeah, it is. That said, it is kind of, I believe it is an unfair thing, which we'll kind of get into that in a moment as well.
And I just want to make sure that we hit this question, going back to the question about partial payments during the pause. I thought that even no payment would count during
You're
this
correct.
time.
That is correct. No payment counts as well as a payment. If you pay nothing, it still counts as a payment. I know that some people have been paying, like trying to pay interest amounts or something like that, or but those do count, the partial payments and the no payments. Just a note about servicers, and I'm going to say this because this is something that I learned. All of these federal loans are actually held by the Department of Education. And my mind, that I didn't get this until somebody said it very explicitly like that. I thought that like these servicers were selling loans to one another, but they're not. They're literally providing just a service for an aspect of the loan that is held by the Department of Education. The final determination for this does not count private loans from, say, a bank or anything like that. You're correct. It does not. This is for federal loans. And as far as Navient goes, how do I say this? Actually, depending on your loans, we're going to talk about consolidation in a moment. If you are going to be consolidating your loans, which most people will, your servicer is going to change, and it won't be Navient. It will go from Advantage, who does the consolidations, and then to Mahila for the public service loan forgiveness part. But if I am already waiting for the last couple of years to make my last qualifying payments, then that forgiveness is it won't be the IRS. It's the Indiana Department of Revenue. And it will be significantly less than what you were paying for. Yeah, and I will say too, I'm not going to convince anybody that they should do something that they're not comfortable doing. But for those of you who want to, I want to at least give you the starting place. Emma says, I never consolidated because I was worried that I would put my PSLF status in jeopardy. So Emma, what I will say is that you are correct. Prior to the temporary waiver, that is what would have happened. And so I did consolidate my loans in 2013 and I lost all of my payments before that, right? Because you consolidate into it. Part of the temporary waiver is that it takes that into consideration. And so one of the things that has happened for me is that those payments I made prior to that first consolidation count towards my payment count now. And that's a very large reason why I wanted to do this actually before today, because the temporary waiver, the deadline to get it in motion for yourself is October the 31st of 2022. Let's see. How will this work? And will it automatically go to the no? So part of it is automatic and part of it is not automatic. They will send, if you have said that you want public service loan forgiveness, and let's say you're going through consolidation with Advantage, they're going to automatically send it over to Mohila. I was thinking we have instructions. So I do not have all of the instructions here, but I do have the links to where those instructions are. And I will explain what I have done. It may be a little bit different for each of you, depending on what types of loans you have. And in some cases, you may not be consolidating all of your loans. For this, let me go on to this, and then I want to talk about loan consolidation a little bit more. Alex, thank you for saying that. That is one of the reasons here that is being paralyzed by fear and overwhelmed is a lot of the reason why people are not getting started. And so hopefully I will encourage you in that, and we'll talk about where specifically to get started and kind of how to do it. But I will also say that in an hour's time, it is not enough for everybody else. They still count whether unsubsidized or subsidized. That's correct. They do. It does not matter, unsubsidized or subsidized. Once things are consolidated, it's going to actually show up as two loans, and one will be unsubsidized and one will be subsidized. And they'll have the same payment counts for them, but they still have those separated from one another in your kind of dashboard. Just a reminder of some of these dates here before I go on to what's next here. The This is supposed to be the last extension of the student loan repayment pause because of COVID, ending December the 31st. The limited PSLF waiver ends October 31st, and that's the one that I really want you to keep in mind. And then, of course, the one-time student loan forgiveness. So I'm going to go on to this next. And I want to address, Martha, your comment, and I'm going to tell you what I did. So I have my debt, of course, from my master's degree and my bachelor's degree. I also have 3 sons, and they also had student debt in the form of their own federal loans, as well as Parent Plus loans. One of the things that you can do during this limited waiver period is you can consolidate those Parent Plus loans into your debt. So what I have now, my debt was, about $90,000. And I had made payments for years and years and years, and it was there. That was actually an increase over my original principal. And I know that many of you have experienced that. Then there was about $60,000 in Parent Plus loans. Okay. So my first step in all of this, even though I had been applying for PSLF over the years, putting in my employer verification, all of those things, was to consolidate my loans. And so I did that. And I went through the process. And you start actually at studentaid.gov. And I'm going to exit out of here and go there real quickly, because I think that that's going to be more helpful. So they do have right here on the splash page, because this is just a huge issue for the entire country, applying for public service loan forgiveness. And it does walk you through a lot of that, but I would actually encourage you to go to the direct page here, public service loan forgiveness. And up at the top, there is an additional link to learn more about the limited waiver. And it's going to walk you through a lot of this, but this is where I started. And so I just followed the steps, but I will say too, I got some more information and some encouragement from a Facebook group that I do have the link here. So my next step was to take action, which was to consolidate. And it lists in here some different things, but there are really more than that. And I learned about the more than that again from the Facebook group and the things that other people have experienced in their process. So, okay. The next thing that I have on this slide, and I wanted to word it differently, but this is the thing that I needed to do. So please don't think that this is actually directed at you. The first thing that I needed to do for this process was to get over it. I was very embarrassed when you say that you have $90,000 in student debt, despite the fact that you have been working for a long time. You have been doing what you thought was the right thing. All of those things, it was embarrassing for me. There was shame, especially when you talk to some of your colleagues and friends, and they say, well, I paid for all of my things. Why can't you pay for all of your things? It seems unfair, all sorts of things like that. And so I really did need to get over that. I also needed to get over some of my own excuses. about, I didn't have time to be on the phone for a long time. And I have seen a couple comments in here about how hard it is to get a hold of somebody. And I will tell you, you're right. It is this process. It is not easy. It is not user friendly. It is not fast. It is not anything about it is going to make you feel good, except for the end. And in the meantime, and I will say another part of this is you will have earned every last bit of the forgiveness that you get, even if you don't believe that you've earned it at this point, which I believe that you have. The one-time loan forgiveness is different from the public service loan forgiveness. It is a set amount of either $10,000 or $20,000 up to $10,000 or $20,000, depending on whether you've received a Pell Grant or not. Public service loan forgiveness is only for people who are working in public service, whereas the one-time loan forgiveness is for anybody that has federal loans. Okay, so I had to get over it. The next thing is to get organized, and this is part of the first one. Yes, Brianne, you will definitely want to be signing up for public service loan forgiveness as well as the one-time loan forgiveness. So the criteria for the public service loan forgiveness is that you work in public service essentially for 10 years. It's a little bit more than that. And yes, Cassidy, that's correct. $323, and I rounded it to 350 rather than down to 300, but and then $646 for the 20,000 if you receive that. So getting organized is going to be knowing what loans you have, and then determining who your servicers are and what your next step is. For most people, the next step is to consolidate your loans. Okay. If you go to studentaid.gov, and yes, Ashley, 10 years. If you go to studentaid.gov and you log in there, they will actually have all of your loans listed there. You need to create an account, which you probably have one if you have applied for student loans. Studentaid.gov is the portal from, yes, 10 years as a full-time employee in public service. Thank you, Andrea. And it does not have to be a consecutive 10 years, by the way. Just there are some idiosyncrasies, and I can't answer all of those, and that would be where I'd say you need to talk to a representative at your servicer, ideally. And there is a helpline number that I have at the end here as well that is MOHELA, but they also answer a lot of them. Studentaid.gov is the portal for the federal government. And so they actually have a list of your loans. I have subsidized and unsubsidized loans, all of the same type. If you have more than one subsidized and unsubsidized loan, okay, if you haven't consolidated, you're going to want to consolidate it, because then what it does is it applies your largest amount of payments toward all of those loans. So for instance, the Parent Plus loans that I consolidated into my loans started, we'll say 2007, right? When the program started and when I was doing repayments on that. But my son's loan started after that, but by consolidating in it, it goes to your greatest payment account. And then you get credit for that. Tina, it is valid in that you may get additional payments count. Now, you may not get forgiveness right now, But you may have payments that are also that are counted that would not have been counted before. So some of it may be valid. It may not put you right towards forgiveness right now. Does the state also tax public service loan forgiveness as income? Allison, I don't know the answer to that. I don't believe so, but I am definitely not for sure on it. I think that I at one point had read that it didn't, but I definitely don't want to be the only one, and I have to do some more research on that. Then there's also a question here about finishing my MLS. Will this count with my newer loan as well? It depends. Depends on how new the loan is, if it's right now, and also if you have an in-school deferment on your loans, it is important to keep in mind that in-school deferment actually does not count towards payments. But again, this is that kind of that category where this is an individualized and individualized case. You definitely need to talk to somebody at the servicer. Does the one-time loan forgiveness apply for current students? I don't know the complete idiosyncrasies in that. I suspect that you can be a current student, but it's not going to be for if you had a loan for this semester, say. It may not be for that. It's really from your total amount of loans anyway. Yes, Stacy, just as you described there. Yes. Okay. As part of getting organized, know your servicer and know if they need to change. So again, this goes back to like Navient. If you are with them, they don't service public service loan forgiveness, and they don't do consolidation. So if you want to consolidate your loans, you're going to start that process at studentaid.gov. In my case, I selected AidVantage as my servicer for that portion. But you can also select Mohila directly, and they're going to just push it over to AidVantage to do that, and then be ready to service public service loan forgiveness. And then create a schedule that starts with today. Anything that is not a direct loan needs to be consolidated. Yes. Yes. I have a few graduate loans and several graduate plus loans. Yes, consolidate them. Do we have to apply for the one-time loan forgiveness? Yes, you do. And the form is not available yet. It will be available the beginning of October, but there's no set date yet. Do we have to apply separately to both forgiveness programs? Yes. The next is get support. And so this is one Facebook group. I have found it very invaluable. They do have some pretty strict a pretty strict code of conduct there, but they're the ones that where I learned you can consolidate in your Parent Plus loans, which I will tell you is one of the best gifts I could give to my children. And I was just over the moon when my consolidation came through, despite the fact that I have more work to do. Other people, and these are the people here, the people that you know that are going through this. Is a temporary waiver a separate document, or it is applied to any PSLF certification application submitted while it is active? It is not a separate document, but again, I am a big fan of calling and making sure that everything is going as it should, and asking a representative at your servicer if there's anything that you're missing or need to do. In fact, I'm taking a personal day tomorrow to essentially be on hold with my servicer. Thank you, Jennifer. I found that Facebook group to be very helpful also. That's how I learned that my first step is consolidation. I was declined previously and nobody could tell me why. Yes, yes. And you will be, This sounds so ridiculous to say, but you really are dedicating so much time to doing this. So of my 9 years of payments, 7 years of those will not count towards PSLF because I was employed in the private sector during those first 7 years. In most cases, that is true, unless they were not for profit. Yes. Can we consolidate our kids' federal loans if they are not parents' loans? Unfortunately, no. No, they have to be loans that are in your name. So my Parent Plus loans that are loans that I took out on behalf of my children that, of course, they promised that they were going to actually pay back, but yeah, apply to both forgiveness programs. So there is the PSLF program, which is the big one. Yep. And then the other one is the one-time loan forgiveness program that was actually just announced a few weeks ago. And there will be a form for that in early October. How do you check if you've been consolidated again? You are correct, Kelly. You cannot consolidate loans that are in your dad's name, but he can. And then how do I check? How do you check if you've been consolidated again? So consolidation is something that you're going to initiate. Nobody's going to do it on your behalf. So you'll actually need to go to studentaid.gov and initiate the consolidation program process there. And then you'll start receiving emails, some of them timely, some of them not. My recommendation is part of that, create a schedule, is that you log into your servicer account or servicer's account and studentaid.gov regularly, even though I know that it's an emotional hit every time you do it. At least it is for me. I mean, I hate logging into those websites and I hate doing this work. There's nothing about it I find pleasant, but the payoff is going to be that hopefully through all of this, I am going to have $150,000 forgiven for this. They do not make it easy, and they do not make it user-friendly, and they do not make you feel good about yourself. And there are people that we know and love who are also very offended by this program. So I would just really encourage you to be your own personal advocate. How do we double check if we received a Pell Grant in the past? I believe that that is also documented in studentaid.gov. I filled out the FAFSA in the past and gotten aid. Was that it? In most cases, yes, but I can't guarantee that. Fantastic. If anybody wants some hope, my father did get his wiped away successfully last November. Yep. Have you heard when Mohila will be updating their accounts? No. And that's one of the reasons that I'm actually taking tomorrow off, because I want to make sure my paperwork is what it needs to be. If you were not working full-time, unfortunately, that it does kind of, honestly, it stinks, and that there is not good news for everybody on that. I wish that there was. Awesome. So, okay, let me go on, and you all keep encouraging one another. That's great. The next is get motivated. And this is a hard one, again, because you are going to be working. You will definitely, again, feel like you have earned every last dollar that gets forgiven, because you're not going to just feel like that. That's the truth of it. You will be working for this. Mine has been transferred from Fed loans to Mohila this month. I feel like I'm in limbo. Aaron, I'm actually there with you. I just checked my Mohila account today. It does show some payment counts, but not all of them. Not that were all reflected before. Where within student aid can we check regarding the Pell Grant? Brent, I'm not 100% sure. I think that you'll need to log into your account and just kind of click around in terms of that, and it may not be there. Oh, wait, Jennifer has this here. There's an area that has a breakdown of all types or amounts of loans, grants that you have. Great, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. If we haven't started the consolidation process, or started applying for the limited public service waivers, they're likely to be some time to get it all completed. Hillary, my recommendation is that you actually go home from wherever you are today, or if you're home, that's fantastic, and you start your consolidation process today. Do some due diligence just to know that like private loans are not going to count toward this, but any federal loans generally are. And it takes a few weeks for the consolidation to go through. And as soon as you hear about that, then the next thing is to jump on following up any information about you need to apply for your PSLF waiver, or for PSLF. You're going to need to get your employment verifications done in a timely manner. And that's why I say, just keep plugging at this, be motivated to work for the next month and a half. I just logged in and it immediately showed pie charts of loans and aid. Fantastic. Can you still start the consolidation when I'm in limbo between servicers? Yes, absolutely. If Nelnet tracked my 0 IDR payments as loan in forbearance, could these be included as payments? Yes, that could be. I think I already consolidated a while back. I'm with Advantage, so I might be, I don't know. You're going to actually need to get in there and double check that. Okay, I'm going to keep going on. You guys are asking great questions. Is doing all this worth doing? It definitely is for me. Or are we going to be paying for in a different way after the forgiveness? That has not been the anecdotal information that I have gotten from anybody, that they have regretted this. Okay. So I have here a list of resources, and I'm going to go ahead and hopefully have the links to these as well, so you have access to all of those links. More information about the PSLF program itself, the limited waiver, as well as consolidating your loans. For Indiana State personnel, there was a publication that came out just recently that has most of this summarized in it, and also an email for employment verification. I did put another website on here for, and I do not endorse this website, but from everything that I looked through, it seemed like valuable information, and the people who used it had good things to say about it. But it is staffed by volunteers, and so it may not be as timely as you need it to be. Again, I have the link to the Facebook group. And I also wanted to make a mention about the scams that are going around. And I've had these come through for me. You get a text message or a phone call, somebody saying that you're eligible for immediate loan forgiveness, or they want to talk to you about loan consolidation, or any of those things. They are scams. They may sound very reputable, but yes, as Brianne says, do not trust those texts or those calls. And this is actually a really great website about where legal action has already been made against certain companies who are acting as predatory lenders. Honestly, they want you to consolidate into their private loans. So will this program be available in the next few years, provided that I'm working full-time in the future? The PSLF program will continue to be available unless something happens, with the federal government, who knows. The temporary waiver will not be. So yes, the temporary waiver is only until October the 31st. It would be lovely if they would extend that, but I do not see that happening. And then I do have the PSLF hotline on here. This is a MOHELA number, but it is actually your best shot. This is the number I'm going to be calling tomorrow. And is it worth it? Oh, I can't answer if it's worth to get your MLS right now. I wish that I could. I have ideas about it, but I don't think they're popular.
So as we're getting wrapped up
Yeah.
here, we are about at the end of our hour. I know there's a lot of questions that were in the chat that we maybe didn't get to, and that's okay. If Ruth is willing, we can just pull all those questions into a document with some answers, and I'll get that posted with the recording, as well as get those sent out with the recording, the chat, the answered questions, and the slides.
Absolutely.
So if there's something that you would like answered and we're too afraid to put it in because we're running out of time, go ahead and put that in the chat. We'll go ahead and capture all of that. And Ruth can get those answered, or what she can get answered, and we'll get those sent out to everyone. Again, you do get one LEU for this presentation. I will send that out with all the other information I just listed. If you are watching an archived recording of this, your information on how to get your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube, or you can also find it on the continuing education site under LEU policies. So we can go ahead and stop the recording.